Exploring the Titanic, Chapter 1 The Beginning of a Dream. I'm sure every diver dreams about the Titanic, said the speaker at the Sea Rovers meeting. To dive down to that fabulous ship would be the ultimate thrill in underwater exploration, but she's probably too far down for anybody to ever find her, far less explore her. It was 1967, and I was a young member of the Boston Sea Rovers, a group of people who loved the sea and the excitement of underwater exploring. Many of the speakers at our meetings were the stars of the underwater world. I had listened to the famous explorer and diver Jacques Cousteau to Dr. Eugene Clark, the shark expert, and been completely awed by their experiences. All of the Sea Rovers loved to talk about shipwrecks and the treasures of the deep. Listening to them, I began to dream about diving to the greatest shipwreck of them all, the Titanic. As long as I can remember, I've been fascinated by the sea. As a boy growing up in Southern California, I was always collecting shells and driftwood that the ocean washed up on the beaches. I always loved to watch the creatures that lived underwater in tidal pools. As a teenager, instead of becoming a surfer like most of my friends, I took up scuba diving and began to explore the world just beneath the ocean's surface. Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, with its adventures of Captain Nemo aboard his legendary submarine, Nautilus, was a book I read over and over again. At university, I did postgraduate work in marine geology at the University of Hawaii. To help pay my expenses, I worked as a porpoise trainer at Sea Life Park. I spent hours teaching dolphins to dive through hoops and perform other tricks. My schooling came to an abrupt halt when I was called into the U.S. Navy. In 1967, my wife, Marjorie, and I loaded all our possessions into our tiny car and drove across the United States to Woods Hole, Massachusetts, on Cape Cod. The Navy had assigned me to the Deep Submergence Group at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. Woods Hole is one of the world's most important institutes for the study of the oceans. Although the oceans cover more than 2/3 of our planet, we are now just beginning to understand them. At Woods Hole, scientists study the mysteries of the oceans both above and below the surface, from weather patterns and tides to underwater currents, sea creatures and plants, and the mountain ranges of the deep. The first time I thought it might be possible to find the Titanic was in 1973, when I was a member of the Alvin team. Alvin is a small three-man submarine. It is officially named after Al Vine, a veteran oceanographer, but unofficially named for Alvin the Chipmunk. Alvin could only dive to 6,000 feet. Since the average depth of the deep ocean is about 12,000 feet, the Navy decided to give it a new hull of titanium alloy, a very strong metal that could hold up to huge underwater pressures and allow us to dive to 13,000 feet. By chance, this refitting project was called Project Titanus. Titanium, Titanus, Titanic. That started me thinking. The Titanic was thought to lie at a depth of just over 12,000 feet. I suddenly realized that I could dive to the Titanic in Alvin. Now, thoughts of the Titanic just wouldn't leave me alone. I knew I had to find that ship. For 12 long years, I tried to get people interested in my dream. I made plans and tried without much luck to raise the money I would need to mount the kind of expedition that could find the wreck of the Titanic. During those years, I also worked as a scientist exploring other parts of the oceans, or the world's oceans. Other parts of the world's oceans. In 1973 and 1974, I joined expeditions that explored the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, an enormous underwater mountain range running down the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. This ridge is part of an even bigger undersea range that extends 40,000 miles around the world. In 1977, near the Galapagos Islands off the coast of Ecuador, we discovered enormous red worms, some of them more than 8 feet long. These giant worms lived inside white tubes and cluster around underwater. These giant worms live inside white tubes and cluster around underwater hot springs. In 1979, off Baja California, we made the most spectacular discovery of all, the amazing black smokers. These underwater vents belch out fluids hot enough to melt lead and shoot them straight up from the ocean floor through chimneys of lava. Soon I had spent more hours in the deep ocean than any other scientist. But the Titanic continued to haunt me. My oceanographic colleagues scoffed at my Titanic dreams and told me I should devote myself to real scientific projects. Then I met Bill Tantum. Bill's nickname was Mr. Titanic because he knew so much about the ship. I would sit and listen for hours as he told me the spellbinding story of what had happened to the ship. I would sit and listen for hours as he told me the spellbinding story of what had happened the night she sank. I would sit and listen for hours as he told me the spellbinding story of what had happened the night she sank. Together, we would talk about my dream of finding her. The Titanic began to mean more to me than simply a challenging target to find in the deep ocean. This greatest of all sea disasters soon gripped me as a fascinating and moving human drama. Now the Titanic had me completely under her spell.